Hi, I'm Aaron Mendoza. I'm 22 years old and I'm Maddie's boyfriend. I went to the West Covina Unified School District and I went to Monte Vista Elementary, Walnut Grove Middle School, and then West Covina High School. And then now I go to Mount San Antonio College in Walnut. Um, the main people that mostly went to those schools were Asian Americans, Latinos, very few Caucasians, but that was about that.
So, what was your experience with multicultural education in your school, and do you know what that is?
Um, Multicultural, yes. In elementary, I would say that we didn't really have to learn a lot about multicultural things. There were certain like projects that we would do, but it wasn't very focused on certain ethnic groups or anything like that. So, but whatever we learned, it was just um, just things related to, let's say, like a country that we were learning about. We would learn about the people there.
And then, about like in high school, did you notice any multicultural education or any opportunities to learn more about any other cultures?
Yeah, there were some clubs that we had in high school. I think there was uh Pacific Islander, something about Pacific Islander. Like there was a club, and anybody could join. And then there was also something about, I think, Mexican heritage, something along those lines. It was a club as well. So we had a couple of clubs, and we learned. You were able to learn a couple of things about that too.
Okay. So some of the seven main characteristics of multicultural education um, goes as follows, and I want to know like what you experienced with each one of these characteristics, if you experienced these in your schooling or not.
Hmm.
So the whole goal of multicultural education is just to have um, like in the simplest form have more cultures educated throughout schooling and not just have one side of history. It's mostly history, but also like inclusion of different groups of people. And I think that's really important. It's just not just about other ethnicities, or it could be about gender, it could be about sexuality, it could be about ability level, like disabled students or not. It's just
Yeah.
it's about that. So these are like the main seven characteristics of multicultural education and what it should be.
Okay.
So it should be anti-racist education. Do you feel like
Mhm.
you experienced that in your school, like anti-racist education?
Anti-racist, I think so. Yeah, I didn't really feel like. I mean, I was young, but at the time, nothing that we learned ever seemed like it was racist or seemed bigoted by the teachers. Like teachers didn't seem like that.
Okay. And then, do you feel like it's basic education? And what that means is like that it's like for everyone in a certain degree, and it's like it should be the foundation of the education.
Yeah, I think that's important, for kids to learn, especially, just to have them grow up knowing different cultures, different where people come from and stuff like that. I think that's important.
Do you think your school had it as like a basic, or do you think that that's something they lacked in?
I think it was something they lacked in. I think more towards high school they kind of opened up about things because they weren't as scared to talk to kids about it. Not scared, but just they were a little bit hesitant because they don't know how kids and parents might react. But I think in high school they kind of opened up more, like explained things better.
That leads us to my next thing, which is multicultural education is important for all students. So, like that idea of that is that it's not just for Latinos. Like Latinos don't need to learn just about Latinos. Yes, it's
Hmm.
important to learn about their culture, but it's important that like white students or Asian American students also learn about these different cultures, especially where we're located in California. It's important to learn about
Hmm.
the people around you. Do you think that like your education that you had at your school was geared just towards that ethnicity group, or do you think it was for everyone to learn?
I think it was for everyone to learn. I mean, I remember in my Spanish class, we would learn. It wasn't just learning, the language and how to form sentences and things like that. Um, it was we learned about the culture and then just the past, just events that happened in the past, revolving around Latino culture. Not even just Mexico, but different countries in South America as well. So I think so.
And then something that's really important about multicultural education as well is that that it's a process. So it's something that like can't happen overnight, and it's supposed to be like something that's like that progresses. And do you feel like that your school taught that as like a progress, as that it's something that we should strive for, it's something that we're always working to do better, just like things like that? Do you think that you experienced that?
Yeah, I think so. I had a history teacher, and she was younger, and she would like teach us different things about like other cultures from history, like that thing that revolved around certain events. So I thought that was cool. I didn't think like a teacher would be able to do that, especially like in history. Usually they just focus like on one thing, but she was able to like interconnect things and talk about different like people.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about your multicultural education in your schooling?
Not really. I think it's important now to like have kids learn about things like that and kind of educate them. Before, like, it was different, and maybe some kids kind of didn't grasp like why teachers were doing it or the school itself was doing it, but I think it was important for all of us to learn, and it still is.
Okay, my name is Lorraine Miranda. Um, I live in Yorba Linda, Orange County, and I went to school as a child in Placentia Yorba Linda School District. Um, as a young child, um, we lived in a neighborhood that was prominently Mexicans, and there was two families that were white families, and my mother had to fight for us to go into school where the predominantly white families went to school. So my uncles and my cousins that were my age, we'd all get the same bus. The bus would pick us up, and they would drop us off they would drop them off at the McFadden School, what they referred to at that time was La Jolla School. And then we were bused to Bradford School, which was in Placentia, California. After that, I didn't realize as a young child, because they didn't talk to us that much about segregation, but as I got older, I realized that we used to get to go to the pool in Orange, but we only got to go the day that the pool was going to be cleaned that evening. We couldn't go in any other time of the week. It was the Mexicans could only go in that day because the pool was going to be cleaned for the white families. And as I got older, with the women's movement, I was able to get a job at Shell Oil Company, they've never had any women there. And there was 6 women that were tested and hired, and only 3 of us made it through the probationary period because the men weren't used to us, so they didn't want women in that area. But there was 3 of us that were determined. Being a single mother, I had to take anything they gave me, and so that I could support myself and my family. And as my son was growing up, we had neighbors that were Jewish. We had neighbors that were Mormons. We had neighbors from the Methodist Church, and they would invite my son, and I used to let him go because I wanted him to experience the different cultures, the different religious educations that they had. Although we were Catholic, but I thought it was important for him to learn about the different religions. And I was the type of mother that had friends that were of all color. And I mean, I had friends that were from the Indians, the blacks, the Mexicans, the whites. And so I was, I had friends that were gay. I just wanted him to experience life as a whole so he could see what life was all about and how everybody lives different, but we're all human. We all have to learn to work with each other, to communicate with each other, to respect each other. And that was the most important thing, for him to learn to respect every culture that there was. And I guess because my mother fought for us at a young age, that I was able to see life different. But I heard stories, it started since my dad was in the service, that my mother fought to put us in Bradford Elementary School instead of McFadden School. And they threatened to put her in jail if she didn't send us to that other school. But my mother, the principal came out, and she used to be my mother's teacher when my mother was a child, and she told them that we were going to go to school there, and that's how we were able to do it. But at the same time, while I was there, people thought, being a fair-skinned person, Mexican, when the Mexicans did come from McFadden into the schools where we were at, that was a high school, Valencia High School. A lot of people that didn't know, they would go in the lockers and they'd be talking in Spanish and making comments about us and different people. But I was brought up bilingual. I spoke Spanish and English, and I would answer back in Spanish to them, and they were surprised because I was from a predominantly white school. And but I always felt like I was fortunate that I had a mother and a father that were going to raise me to love and respect all religions, all cultures. And I'm at 7, I'm going to be 78, and I still respect all of that. I have families that we're very multicultural families now. We have Filipinos in our families. Our families married with Filipinos, married with blacks, married with people from Mexico, married American white people from here, because we're all American, but the white people from here. So I think that I was a very fortunate person at a young age, that I had parents that taught me all of this, and therefore I tried raising my son that way. And hopefully my grandchildren have the same attitude and learn from all that we did, because my grandchildren are multicultural. They're part Hungarian and part Mexican, like we are. And I can't teach them the Hungarian lifestyle, but they know all the Mexican stuff, our culture, how we make tamales. I still keep that, all the tamale making and all this type of stuff that we do every Christmas. And I'm hoping that I'll teach them enough so that they can continue teaching their kids all of these cultural things that come from our family, but yet they're out exposing them to everything else.
Hi. My name is Michaela. I'm 22 years old.
And then where did you go to school?
I went to California School of the Arts. It's in the Duarte School District.
And then are you familiar with multicultural education?
I can assume what it is. I assume it's just education that incorporates different cultures in their teachings and is, I don't know, just make sure to acknowledge multiple cultures in education.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. That's pretty standard of what we've been like learning this whole semester. It's just like having inclusion, and then just giving multiple opportunities for education and multiple opportunities for different cultures, just especially since a lot of the time that these cultures go unnoticed in the schooling system. But that's basically it. So my questions for you is like, if you experience multicultural education at your school. Do you think, from your knowledge, do you think you experienced that in your schooling?
I think so. I don't think it was perfect, but I think so. Since I was at a performing arts school, there's a lot of like liberal-minded people, and the administration definitely made sure to acknowledge like multiculturalism, and like in history classes we covered everything. Like it was like the things that I've heard that people didn't learn in high school in their like history classes, we definitely learned. Like I know, like you said last night, that you hadn't even known about the like Japanese internment camps in California from high school education. But like we covered all of that, and like Stonewall riots, and just like definitely covered like lots of civil rights movements of marginalized communities, more than just like the than like African American civil rights movement, since I mean everyone learns about that. But there's so many other like smaller movements that a lot of people don't know about, and I feel like we got a more well-rounded education with that. And then we also had like a kind of like what would function, I guess, as like an ethnic studies course. It was like I think it was called like human geography or something. But it was like, and I didn't take that one because it was, I think, like a freshman class, but and I started there my sophomore year. But to my knowledge, that was kind of like a class that explored different cultures around the world and was like informing students about that.
That's really good. Okay, so some of the like characteristics of multicultural education, like the goals of it, and kind of just like basic characteristics of it are that multicultural education is anti-racist education, and I think that's really important. And from what you're saying, you experienced that because they had the opportunities in different classes, which I like never had in my schooling. So
that was definitely anti-racism was like a definite, I guess, like pillar of our education. And I do have a little bit of knowledge of behind the scenes because my mom worked there. And I do know like that the staff, they have like summer readings and stuff. I know that the administration enforces that. And there have been books that they've read specifically about like anti-racism and anti-racism education and stuff. I remember one book that they had to read was like, I think it was that one where it was like I'm not talking to white people about race anymore, something like that. I think it was that one. But I do know that there's like definitely a effort of the administration to enforce that. And then we also had a thing that we did on like one day during the week that was during our office hours, because at my school, since it was a performing arts school, like half of our day was academic and then the second half was our arts, and then in between that we had an office hours period that functions like the same way it would during college. You can go to your teachers and ask for help and stuff, but we had one specific day of the week, like every other week, where our office hours, we would stay in our final academic class of the day during office hours, and they had like specific talks like about topics that we were supposed to discuss, and they were definitely about like inclusion and trying to start a conversation about certain maybe like uncomfortable topics. And they were like I remember a point that they highlighted during those conversations is that the point was to be like uncomfortable, because like the uncomfortable conversations are the ones that you should be having. You know,
that kind of ties into like the next thing, is that it's basic education. So it's like something that sounds like your school sounds like it did a good job of showing this, is like that multicultural education should be the basis of education, because that's where we live, and those are the things that are important. And that sounds like, and then that ties also into the next one. So all these kind of like go off of each other, but it's important for all students, and that's kind of what you said too. It's like a lot of people believe that, oh well, Latino students should only learn about Latino culture, or like African American students should only learn about like the history, you know, like things like that. But it's like really important for all students to learn it, and it seems like you had that experience at your school.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And then I have another question for you. This is not necessarily multicultural education, but it's something that we discussed in this class. We talked about like inclusion of people with like disability as well. And so since you are diagnosed with ADHD, do you feel like, you weren't diagnosed while you were in high school, but do you feel like since high school and then in college now you've been given good opportunities to learn in your own way?
When I was in high school?
Or like maybe since you weren't diagnosed, did you see students who, especially since your mom is in special education, do you think that like they provided a good like strategies to have inclusivity for students?
That's where I think they fall short, because I've heard a lot from my mom, who's a special education teacher there, that it's kind of frustrating with administration in the special education department. I don't know all the ins and outs of, or the politics of what's going on there, but I do know that there are some issues in that sector. And it's also hard because at my school, they didn't have separate classes for special education students necessarily. So like, because my mom, when she used to work at Bellflower High School, and she was specifically a special education math teacher. And so she taught like kind of like basic math. Like it was a lot of like simple algebra and like fractions and just stuff that these students struggled with. And then she would also incorporate like real life math situations, but they didn't have that at CS Arts. All of the special education students are incorporated into the other classes, and then they have like maybe one class where they go to a special education classroom, and that's what my mom would help with, and they kind of can just get assistance with their work from other classes from the special education teachers. And like I think that's good in a sense, because I don't think it's necessarily good to separate those kids from the rest of the school, because that can be like isolating, but at the same time I don't think they've found like the right balance and maybe found enough support, I guess, because then it even though it is better that they're included, then it does kind of prevent certain supports that they can get, I guess. So it just makes things a little more complicated, and I don't think maybe they've found out exactly how to make that function 100%, you know?
Yeah.
But they do have, like, my mom runs a wellness center there, and so students can go there, and it's kind of just like a chill environment to like get work done, and you don't have to be like have an IEP to go there. It's just like a nice calm environment. So like they definitely they're supportive, but it is more difficult, I think, for students who have like more severe disabilities. If you were someone like me, where like I had ADHD, but I never really I didn't get my diagnosis until college, that was like CS Arts was a good environment for me, and that's kind of the reason why I didn't know that I had ADHD for so long, because when you do have like, I'd say more like mild learning disability, then I think that environment is really good for you. But if you need like more support than can be given in that environment, then it can be difficult. But I think the way that the school was set up, it was good for me, and pretty easy for me to function. But I do see that people with more severe disabilities aren't getting exactly the right amount of support, I think. I also remember specifically that in my junior year, because that year is like supposed to be like American lit.
Mhm.
But my teacher did a different route, and she focused on Native American writers,
Cool.
Native American authors, and so that was really cool because like there's so many like books and authors that I never heard of,
Mhm.
and like those are probably the most authentic
Mhm.
American authors.
Yeah.
And so it's cool that it wasn't like just about like books that like old white men
Yeah.
wrote, and by
Mhm.
like a different perspective of American,
Mhm.
you know. And I really liked that, and actually found like my favorite book through that. So
And what's your favorite book?
it's called There There.
There.
It's very good. You should read it. But yeah, so that was cool too. I really enjoyed that because there was a lot of stuff that I learned about like Native American culture through that, and then it was just nice to not read the same books that you already have heard about for the
Mhm.
past like 12 years
Yeah.
in school. So
Mhm.
so that was cool. I am going to I'm gonna praise anthropology for a second here. And I want to say that as an anthropology major, I think that anthropology should be taught in public schools. I think that would solve a lot of our problems with
Mhm.
multiculturalism, because I mean anthropology is kind of at its core like
Yeah.
multiculturalism, and I think that learning about like cultural relativism and just getting different perspectives from different cultures and reading ethnographies from different cultures, that has helped to open my mind to a lot of different ways of life and different social systems and communities and cultures. And it's a cool way to learn about different people that live in this world that you wouldn't necessarily ever meet,
Mhm.
but just knowing about the diversity that we have around the world. And I think that especially like that driving in the point of cultural relativism is really important in anthropology, and I think teaching that to students from a younger age would help to make people more tolerant and educated and cool.
Hi, I'm Maddie Miranda. I am 22 years old, and I grew up in the Kern County school district area. So I went to like the elementary schools there, the middle schools, and then the Kern County High School District. It was an interesting experience growing up there. I wouldn't say that we focused really anything on multicultural education. I would say like in my main classrooms, I didn't really have these. Like I was really heavily in the arts and everything like that. And I think that in the arts, we did talk about lots of multicultural things. Especially growing up in Bakersfield. Bakersfield was quite conservative, and so things are kind of left out on purpose, in my opinion. Not necessarily by the teachers themselves, but by mostly the district and everything like that. But in the arts, I found, which is what I want to be. I want to be a choral director of a high school or middle school. I found that there was many more opportunities to talk about the arts and talk about different opportunities for multicultural education. Like we had pieces, and each time we got a new piece, we got to talk about, especially if it was in a different language, we would talk about what the significance of that is, where it comes from. And I got experience to do like Hungarian music, different songs from Kenya, French music, Italian music. Like we did a lot of multicultural education through music in this way, and that's something that I want to continue in my teaching when I become a teacher. I really want to also emphasize for my future students, if they feel like there is a language or a culture that is being not misrepresented but underrepresented in my classroom, I would love to hear about what they would like to see or what they would like to perform, because like maybe some people are sharing their like native language that I'm not aware of, and like I don't know not as many pieces are published for them, and I would love to find pieces for them to go ahead and show, just because it's important for all my students to feel like they're represented in every classroom. And the arts is such an easy way to make everyone feel included. That's the point of the arts, at least in my opinion. Like it's all about inclusion, all about like we are one, and I want students to feel safe in my classroom to do so. reflecting on the different people I interviewed Aaron Mendoza, and he, to me, had a pretty like normal experience. I would say kind of like mine, where there were some aspects of his schooling that allowed for multicultural education, and then there was also aspects that just were kind of like complacent, didn't go the extra step. And so I wanted to interview him because I wanted to hear how like some schools are just kind of doing what they have to and not really going above and beyond, or not making a stronger effort, kind of like my school. And then Lorraine Miranda, she's my grandma. I interviewed her because I knew her experience with the past and her past in education, and I knew how important multicultural education was to her, and I originally went into it going to ask her similar questions as I asked in all of the interviews. But I just let her keep talking, and I just let her express herself and tell me what she wanted to say. And in doing so, I realized she was talking about like having multicultural education outside of the classroom. She really was discussing things about like in her fundamental beliefs and everything like that, that she should have multicultural education. Like she was talking about with my dad, that when he was young, she would go and allow him to go to different churches or go to different events so that he understood what it was like for other cultures. And I think that's really important because multicultural education needs to happen in schooling, you know, just because that is the curriculum that's supposed to happen. Like in one of the 7 pillars, it's like it's basic education, and the curriculum needs to follow that. But also I think it's really important to like continue this education in the home, because there are different types of education like we discussed in the class. It's not just like schooling is your education. Like you were educated in many different ways, and I think being at home and your parents teaching you things is like another level of education. And I think it's really important that she taught my dad these things, because he learned to grow up in a place where he didn't discriminate against people. She was saying that when he was younger, he had a cousin who was black, and he warned my dad when he was little, like, oh, you know, just be careful when we're out, just because I am black, and he's a Mexican, but he was a more pale skin when he was younger. And he's like, be careful when we're out. And this was in the 70s. So because he was stating that people might not know why they're together, you know, and my dad didn't understand. He was so little. He said like, oh, you're not black, you're brown. He didn't understand like the difference. That's what my grandma told me. Like he didn't understand the difference of like what those things meant significantly, like to others, in the way that like there's the racism there, because he wasn't growing up in a house that was racism was taught. And then I think this reflected on me when I was a little kid. I learned, my parents would like say to me, they would tell me, you love whoever you want, no matter what they look like, nothing. And I didn't understand that when I was little. And they always said this to me, you love whoever you want, because I would talk about, you know, I was a little girl wanting to get married and talking about, oh, one day when I get married. And my parents would say, you know, we're going to support you no matter what. No matter who you marry, no matter who you love. And I always thought that was very odd, because I was like, why are they telling me that? Like I remember thinking to myself when I was little, I was like, that's so weird. And one day I confronted them about it, and I was like, why do you guys keep telling me that? They're like, we just want you to know you can love whoever you want, we're gonna support you. And then they said like, no matter what, like the gender, ethnicity, they went into more depth in that conversation. And I told them that I thought they meant that they wanted me to marry someone ugly. It's silly now, but I think that shows, like, in my household, that I was taught, like, everyone is the same, everyone is equal. And then with what Michaela was saying, they went into in depth, they're my step sibling, they went into in depth about like their schooling process, and like they did go to an art school. It is the sister school of OSHA over here in Orange County, but they went to San Gabriel School of the Arts, and they were talking about, like, I expected them when interviewing them before, that their school was gonna be perfect, and like they were gonna be, everything was gonna be inclusive, and the education was there, the proper education for the multicultural education. And you know, like the education side of it was like the steps of the 7 characteristics were heavily involved in their schooling. Something that I didn't know went on was like at their school with like the special education department, because my stepmom is part of the special education department there, and Michaela went into depth about that, that they have a really good way of integrating all students together, because they only have one class separated from others, and which I think is really great, because then that's the inclusion aspect of everything. But Michaela was saying that there's a lack of more help for those who need more help, and maybe that's something that they can continue, like the school itself can continue working on in the future for their inclusivity. But I think that, like, reflecting on what they all said, is that I think multicultural education with the people that I surround myself is something that's very important, and something that, like, we have seen a lot of. I can understand that a lot of people, especially growing up in Bakersfield where I did, don't really care about that kind of thing. And to me, as a white passing Latina, I really think it's important to talk about all the cultures, all the aspects of everything, because the big thing I took away from this semester was like self-esteem. And I know there's like so many bigger aspects of what we talked about, but I reflected on how everything tied back into the student. If they feel left out, if they feel like their culture is being talked badly about, if they feel like because they have a disability they can't be with everyone else, all of these lead back to self-esteem issues. And like, I think that's something that's really important to allow a child to thrive. In order to make everyone feel included and cared for under my classroom and in my care, I really want them to have like that really high self-esteem. And I know it'll be a learning curve when I become a teacher, because it's going to be new. I've never had to work with that many children at once, and there's going to be so many people I'm going to have to meet, and trying to do all this at once is challenging. And I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect my first couple years of teaching, but I want to make everyone feel included and build these foundations of multicultural education within my classroom, because that's something that I find is very important, especially when we deal with matters of different languages, different cultures in the music that I'm going to be teaching. What the great thing is about teaching music, and this is what my music education teacher, Chris Peterson, talks about in class a lot, is that we are lucky to be music educators, because our curriculum changes every semester. It can change whenever we want to change it up. Math teachers, he says, have to teach out of a book, the same book every year. Maybe it gets changed, like the edition every so often, but us as music educators get to change our curriculum. So if I want to change my curriculum to make it feel like people are included and like their cultures are included in the music, then I'm gonna do that. That's what's important to me. And I think moving forward, I'm just gonna do my best to continue the legacy of those before me, like my parents and my grandma, just making sure that everyone feels included and loved, because we are just all people. And no matter who you come from or where you come from or what culture you come from, we're all people. And I think that should be completely celebrated, and it will be celebrated in my classroom.